All right, back from the quick break there. So we left off at the meta-narrative, difficulties in expressing it, and I just wanted to note that I'm trying to stay within the kind of within the areas of knowledge, or I guess within the areas that I'm familiar with. I'm especially trying to relay experience. I'm trying to give to paint that picture. So this is the strike point domain. I'm trying to give a big enough, broad enough picture into certain areas so that people may be able to use this information to bootstrap their own processes in dealing with that. And so I'm not, of course, not an expert in a lot of this stuff or any of this stuff, but I see some certain things that seem really important, and that's kind of what I'm trying to jump from here and there. So this example of the meta-narrative, the problem of walking on eggshells, my approach to this is the basically the respect protocol that I believe I mentioned earlier, that I will simply respect any narratives, especially in the presence of guests and participants, and in the case where I am in the company of only members, and that's what I believe. When that is the case, then it becomes possible to talk about the narrative, the meta-narrative, because then you have something to work with on the interpreter side. So whoever I'm talking to or expressing to, on the interpreter side, I know that the Spirit is with them and should be able to navigate the context of what's happening, rather than simply this participant a degree of coherence in dealing with things in a sort of law-based, machine-based, reactionary type of navigation. In other words, a neurological or a neurotic ideological apprehension of whatever's in question. So yeah, that is a major problem, and I think that the church needs to figure this one out big time, because otherwise, if we can't even reconcile among denominations within a church, how can we reconcile with other religions? Like, that's even more difficult. How can we remain open to the fact that the Spirit of God is working everywhere, and you never know who has been blessed in this way through their experience in their life. It doesn't matter what religion, what culture. We have to acknowledge, or where we end up through membership acknowledging and understanding that this is something that can happen to anybody, and this is really something that in our history, that our cultures at times cultivated and demanded and were necessary of the types of relationships and the types of societies that we had in the past. It was necessary to have this Spirit and to have this dynamic relation between the abstract and the concrete. And just to give a quick, I guess, analogy that I thought of, and I guess calculus in general has this implied this issue of the concrete and the abstract. So you're approaching a limit. The limit is the abstract. The concrete is your set of data or whatever you're dealing with, your context. And it's like the temperature. What temperature is it outside? Well, right now it's about 5 degrees. And you could say in your mind, okay, it's 5 degrees. He's talking to me and it must be pretty cold. 5 degrees, that's like, 40 Fahrenheit. So that fact, taken as a number, as a fact, as something processed by the mind, is interesting in that probably your mind led you to this overwriting of reality with this APS. So the spectacle being overwritten by the APS. And what you did is you projected your APS out onto the spectacle, and you suppose that the exact configuration of the molecules or whatever here were on some type of pristine, perfect standard position that is at exactly 5.00000, and on an infinite number of zeros degrees. And so that's the exact motion of the molecules. The exact energy content is 5.00. So this type of projection, this type of mental projection, fails as soon as we go into the context and as soon as it matters. Not that the temperature is going to matter exactly to any kind of degree, unless you're maybe like around 0 or the freezing temperature, and you're wondering things like this. So like by definition, the water freezes at 0. If you're running some kind of experiment which is really close to that, maybe it might actually be important that it's not actually 1 degree, it's actually half a degree or a quarter of a degree or whatever. And again, so we have this approximation of the mind, this overlay of reality onto to make sense of the stories, to make sense of the context. But there is no such thing as 5 degrees or 1 degree or even 0 degrees. You'll never find that exact point where water freezes. Whatever solution you're measuring is going to have a range of different temperatures, and you're merely gathering approximations out of the environment. And so this is just, I guess, a pretty concrete example of why that dynamic between the abstract and concrete must be present. And hopefully you can imagine why this is important in your life, and why that you cannot simply overwrite or project the mind and its reality onto your experience of reality, so to speak. The approximation will never be the actual, and the actual will never be something that we know. Nothing can ever be perfectly quantified. There's always uncertainty. It's inherent. It's a fundamental archetype. So I suppose this brings us to the Great Axial War. This brings us to the Great Schism between the mind and the body, and it goes along these lines that we have that our experience of reality has been limited due out of ignorance to a mere projection of reality, a projection of our reality onto existence, and the navigating of that as a virtual, sort of like a virtual reality. So this is one good way, I suppose, to interpret the virtual. I don't know. I'm trying to think of some concept like. That we live in a virtual reality, that we live in the Matrix, so to speak. Here's another one that this reality is a simulation controlled by some outside computers, and that's another metaphor to this very exact issue that we're talking about right now, is that the mind is sort of trapped in itself, in that it hasn't been shown. The body has been repressed. It hasn't been shown how to connect with itself. The mind-body connection. We've been taught to suppress our emotions and to not cry and to not express the needs of the body, and so this the way that we've been taught is to take our reality as as reality itself, like to take our simulation that's going on within the neurological operating system to present us with what we perceive as consciousness. These processes, these somewhat mechanical in some ways, very predictable. So these processes that are going on to present us with reality, we are then experiencing this reality that we're presenting to ourselves, and we are mistaking that for the concrete reality around us. So in other words, our APS, our abstract phase space, is being projected onto the spectacle without a relationship between. So to parallel the analogy here, so then we're kind of saying that the APS is more like the mind, and the concrete or the spectacle is the body. So the concrete is our context, and when we project our reality onto the concrete, onto the spectacle, and when we don't have that negotiation, we are automatically set up to fail, especially over time, as things change, because everything in life is always changing. Nothing is ever the same or steady or stable. Really things are always changing, and any time that we have a way of being that we like, life always seems to have a way of creeping up on those expectations and pulling the rug out from underneath us. So anytime that we have, so this is a crusted up region of the APS, it's being projected over, and it's sort of dominating the spectacle. It's dominating our concrete reality, and it's only a matter of time before that ends up painfully. So we need to have this learning dynamic, this flowing and flexibility dynamic, in which whenever we project our reality onto the world, we have to be very conscious of what facets of that reality are we dealing with, and how can we try to be sensitive to what we're experiencing in context, to update our expectations of reality, to update what we think of reality, and trauma, as I got into before, is really a very clear case of where this is happening. When we experience pain and we want to avoid it, as in previous histories, like due to previous histories that we've had, that is a crusting up of the APS, that is losing that dynamism, that flow of navigation, that potentiality is being reduced down into a simple set of rules that say do not go here, do not do this, and so these heuristics pile onto us. Before we know it, we don't want to do anything, and we feel like nothing is possible. And so this dynamic between between the spectacle and the APS is what needs to be brought back to life in the case of trauma. And this is a critical part of you could say spiritual maturity. Having this flow and this dynamic with the context of the body. And so this was always perceived as dangerous to religions who took advantage of this cognitive discrepancy, which allowed our realities to seem real and rigid and unchangeable. So religions quickly instituted the killing off of anything that, or I guess you could say monotheism, especially the killing off of anything that allowed that such a freedom of questioning of questioning reality, because then the very system of the religion, whatever symbol set it depends on, suddenly comes into question when the spirit comes up. And this is something that keeps happening no matter what. It's impossible. This is like trying to kill the human spirit. This is at the core of who we are. This flexibility, this life force, this always striving to be free to create, and to create more, and to create life, and to just keep going and never get stuck. So the way that religion responded really to this externalization of meaning, was to further push it out into that neurotic space, where there is no dynamic between the inner and the outer world. So this gets into identity as a central kind of fulcrum point of that externalized control. When we have an identity that is known to society and that reacts to society, for example, that we think we are a good student or a good spouse, or we think we are a good citizen or a good person or whatever. Even that we have a reputation for our name and the way that we look. We know that this is known to others, and so we have this reputation, and we have these hooks of potentially guilt and shame. And I guess on the flip side, we also have reinforcing other positive reinforcements, which are more in the classical or whatever sense of positivity, such as reward or recognition, being recognized, being praised. We love this kind of stuff. It's boosting to our ego, to our sense of identity, and so the identity itself is really at a fulcrum point of this externalization of control. So when your identity is in God, and truly in the universe, in an embodied way, that you are in communion with God, that your body is the holy temple, this flies outside of the context of purely rational navigation of life, based on, for example, like identity. You cannot be shamed or controlled in a mechanistic machine type way, if you have a way of navigating your context on your own, and if you have this inner authority of the Holy Spirit with you, you cannot be controlled as if you're a machine. No longer can such things be held over you. And this is, I guess, the reason why monotheism had to stamp out and quash out any other liberating spiritualities, so to speak. Anything that put you in touch with the body. And so we have in the church the repression of the body, complete repression. Even where the priests are, for example, supposed to be celibate in some cases. And we have this denial of the body, which is impossible to maintain, and so of course you have this coming out in just sick and twisted ways with like pedophilia and like sexual perversion. Of course, if you're celibate, and we could get into probably all kinds of ways that society have controlled itself and controlled people through dark temptations, through the body, through repression, and just selfish desire. So anytime we have the body repressed or the body ignored, or in other words, some reality projected by the mind onto the body, so in other words, the body being enslaved in some way and not listened to, and no dynamic relationship happening, we always can expect some extras, some really out there behaviors that are just trying to compensate. So we have compensation or compensatory behaviors, which are always going to happen. There's going to be some structure that you'll find, which is trying to deal with the incoherence.